11 o'clock Thursday morning. Welcome back in. It is now the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, along with you here in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Want to jump back into the breaking news of the morning. You guys reporting on this in Gamecock Central a little bit earlier on, and we did have the Board of Trustees meeting at 8:30 this morning, which officially confirmed that Mike Fury going to be joining South Carolina as its new wide receivers coach. Had just previously been the head coach out at Limestone College up there in Gaffney, so a little bit of a local connection there, but replacing James Coley, who again just about a week ago left and took the same position at the University of Georgia. So this is a name, while maybe not directly connected to Shane Beamer with a prior relationship there, a guy that's obviously familiar with the state, has been a wide receivers coach, but the NFL and the college level before, and somebody that tomorrow we'll hear from Shane Beamer on how exactly this came to be.
Yeah, Beamer's going to introduce him Friday 11, right when we would normally be talking, I guess. We'll, I'm sure, have that, I would think, here on the station as well. And, yeah, I think obviously the last couple of days, this is where this was headed. And, you know, I'm, you know, not that head coaching experience doesn't matter, because I think it does. I think it gives you a little bit of a big picture standpoint as opposed to just being in your bubble. And I think regardless of the level, when you're a head coach, you have a little bit more, hopefully you have a little bit more appreciation of what it's like to sit in that spot and have to make 100 or 1,000 different little micro decisions any given day, any given week, any given month. And, you know, hopefully that's how you take it, as opposed to thinking, oh, I can do better. But I think anytime you bring in a guy who has that experience, that adds a little bit extra to kind of your building. But I am most intrigued by the fact that he played in the league for a number of years, was kind of an underdog story as a wide receiver, and ended up being actually very, very productive, one of his seasons, and then coached in the league as well. And I think that's something, first of all, if you're coaching a position in the NFL, you know what you're talking about. Like, you're going to know how to coach up that particular position. And I think that's something that you're going to sell on a resume. You can already look at what South Carolina tweeted from the Gamecock football account, sort of hyping up the NFL experience there. And that's something, ultimately, recruiting is about relationships, but it's about selling resumes and selling what a coach can do for you. How can a coach develop you? How can a coach get you ready for the next level? So if I'm South Carolina, I am pushing the heck out of the fact that this guy played in the league and coached in the league. And now I think the head coaching part is just maybe an added bonus for me.
I told Tyler last hour that I'm fascinated by this hire. Like, that's the best word I could come up with. Because remember, Wes, to kind of go behind the scenes, I mean, you and I talk all the time, you know, covering a coaching search. Part of our job is, you know, who's going to be the next guy. And so, I mean, I even published a piece, names that make sense, you know, for the South Carolina coaching job. You can go that route. We also, of course, go the route of who do we actually hear as a candidate where there's mutual interest. I mean, Mike Fury wasn't on my list of guys that make sense, because he wasn't someone that you would immediately say, oh, here's a tie to Shane Beamer, or, here's some other reason that he may be in the mix. But what we also knew, and you and I talked about this, Shane Beamer operates pretty quietly in his assistant coaching searches. And there's typically going to be a name that you hear that maybe the person gets the job, maybe they don't. But you're typically going to hear a name where you go, wow, oh, okay, didn't have that one on the radar. Like, I remember Sterling Lucas, when his name came up, I remembered him as a recruit, but didn't know that he was, you know, going to be in the mix for that job. So we hear Fury's name, and you're like, wow, you know, here's a guy that's going to come with, I think people will have questions like, this isn't a guy that's a James Coley that's, you know, a 20-year veteran of major schools, right? But he does have a really, I think, unique and very interesting resume in that, as you said, former NFL coach, former NFL player, been a head coach a couple places and improved those programs. Everything points to him being a really good coach. And then, as Shane Beamer alluded to, he's got a pretty cool backstory. And so I think if you're looking at one of the key parts, which is ultimately in college, man, you got to be a good recruiter to have success. That's going to be a question because he hasn't done it at this level as an assistant for one position. But does he have the ingredients to where you could see him possibly being one? I do think I can see that. But that'll be something that you have to assess in real time and see how it goes.
Yeah, you like anything, I think a guy comes in, you give him a clean slate, and then you wait and see what happens, and you kind of determine from there what your reaction is. I think for South Carolina, they obviously went a much different direction here than they went with the Coley hire.
How much of that has to do with the fact that this hire is being made a lot farther along in the offseason than like the Coley one was made back in January, where there's a lot of movement? You're making those, kind of hires normally, to where now we're literally in the last day of February, to where maybe some of the other options that were on the table or on a list of names for when Coley was hired maybe aren't as available anymore this time of the year.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Shane Beamer. I don't want to pretend I am, but I think for one, you naturally just go a little bit. Maybe when something doesn't work out the way you saw it, you naturally are inclined to go a little bit in an opposite direction, and so I think that's part of it. Some of it is that when Coley was hired, we've talked about this. It's not like South Carolina had a wide receivers opening per se. It was more, hey, Coley's out there. This guy has a big-time resume. Let's go get him. And as I've said before, I think when you hire a big-name guy like that, you always run the risk that they're going to leave at some point. You just don't think it's going to be like a month and a half later. You think maybe he's going to at least give you a year or two. So I do think some of that probably does come at play here, Tyler. But there are other directions they could have gone with guys that were, sitting wide receiver coaches at places right now. And, I think this is just a situation where Beamer definitely takes an approach where he's not going to hire a guy based on name alone. And, at times, has he been criticized by certain parts of the fan base for that? Yes, he has. But then, you know what? James Coley, that was a big-name guy as far as the assistant coaching ranks at the SEC level go. So he's gone different directions with these hires based on what he sees fit. And so he obviously, I'm sure, tomorrow when he speaks, he's going to tell us that he thinks it's a great fit, I'm sure. He's going to talk about the NFL background. He's going to talk about this being a fiery, high-energy guy. He's probably going to talk about the fact that he wants to be here. I think that's part of it. And you can even see the administration here. I don't know whose idea it was. Again, not speaking for anybody, but I look at facts and then respond to them. There's a $800,000+ buyout if Fury were to show up at work tomorrow and say, I'm out of here, guys. So that speaks volumes to me. Now, it goes down. So the way they built this thing in, essentially.
Can we call that the Coley clause?
Ooh, that's giving him a lot of credit, but yeah, probably. So if Fury leaves within the first 120 days, he owes the school $850,000. And if you look at the rest of the contract that they sent out, it's pretty much boilerplate. Exactly. You look at the incentives. You look at comes with a stipend for a car. It's exactly what you would see with any other assistant being hired right now. And then you're like, wait, that's not the same. And it was even noted on the BOT meeting, if he leaves within 120 days in the open session part of it, if he leaves within 120 days, $850,000 goes to the school. That drops to $350,000 at any point after the 120 days, but still in this year. And then it is $250,000 for the rest of the length of the contract. But that's clearly sending a message right there, I think. And obviously, they got, $450 out of Coley?
Yep.
So they paid for the first year of Furry's contract with Coley's buyout, essentially. But you kind of, I'm sure, look back and wish that $850 was in there for Coley. But at the same time, the other side of this, you could very easily say now, it should have been $1 million buyout or something. That doesn't mean Coley would have agreed to it because you're
Yeah.
fighting other schools
Right.
to hire him in the first place.
Well, and if Georgia truly wanted Coley bad enough, I'm sure they could have ponied up the funds to pay the 850 or even $1 million if it was that high. But yeah, this is definitely a direct reaction to what happened with Coley there, and that should be incentive enough for Fury to stick around for a while, I would think.
I had a Georgia fan tell me on Twitter when I noted that South Carolina would collect the full Coley buyout. That's chump change to Georgia. I said, cool. That's cool. No problem. Just noting.
I don't know if it's chump change, but I'm sure that
That's what this guy said, Tyler.
were the ones that
One of your
helped pay
boys,
that. Yeah.
one of your boys from the Georgia fan base said that, Tyler.
We're not all lumped in together.
Yeah, well, I'll give you that. You don't want to ever be lumped in with every opinion from your fan base.
There are some
of
bad
any
ones out
fan
there.
base.
There are some bad ones
I
out there.
think. By the way, guys, we got Stuart Lake coming
We do.
up.
Yes, we do. We're going to dive into some of the conversation, getting ready for the Palmetto Series coming up this weekend as the Gamecocks get set to play host to Clemson Friday night out at Founders Park, Saturday out at Segers Park, and then the Upstate on Sunday to wrap up the series. So Stuart Lake will join us on the other side, dive into that, and preview the series for the Gamecocks. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
All right, guys, continuing to welcome our newest sponsor here on the show. It's our friends at Classic Roofing, offering residential and commercial roofing services throughout Columbia, South Carolina, and, of course, the surrounding areas. My friend Joe Reeder and Max Sawyer, they're residents of this state. Their families live here. They're South Carolina guys, and they want to take care of you with their wealth of experience in the roofing game, spanning more than 20 years. Here's how you can get in touch with them. Call them today, 803-590-7870. Maybe you want more information. Maybe you're not a big phone guy. You can go to classicroofingsc.com. On there, you're going to find more information about their services and a link to set up a free estimate. Their team of experts, they are well equipped to handle all of your roofing requirements. That could be residential project, a commercial undertaking, or really anything in between that. They've got you covered. Call them today, 803-590-7870. Head on over to classicroofingsc.com.
Welcome back in. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you on this Thursday morning. Quick reminder, coming up on Saturday before the game between Clemson and South Carolina out at Segra Park, going to have the Battle of Bull Street Street Party going on out there. You have an opportunity to win some tickets to attend that coming up today on the postgame show from 3 until 6. Be tuned in, listening to Jay and Elijah for your chance to win, again, for the Battle of Bull Street Party out at Segra coming up on Saturday. We now head out to Love Chevrolet phone lines. Welcome back in Stuart Lake, who, of course, is on the call for the Gamecock baseball broadcast. Stuart, first of all, thanks so much for taking a little bit of your time this morning. We last talked to you right before the season started a couple of weeks ago. Now that you've seen a 9-game sample size of the South Carolina team, what stands out the most to you out of what you've seen so far?
Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me on. It's been the biggest thing I think we talked about that day. It's still trying to figure out our pitching staff, but I sure think we're seeing a lot of positive things from them. That's been the biggest part to me as I started to kind of crunch the numbers, if you will, yesterday between us and Clemson. Our pitching numbers keep jumping out. I mean, a 2.4, ERA, what we're doing, I feel, out of the bullpen with so many arms is just, it's really been a good 9 games to kind of start getting a feel for our pitching staff.
Hey, Coach, it's Wes. Appreciate you doing this again, man. I'm curious,
Yes,
as a guy who you're just an all-around baseball guy, you've seen this rivalry from a fan perspective, now an analyst perspective, from a coach perspective. What does South Carolina versus Clemson baseball, when these two teams square off every year, what does this rivalry mean to you?
Well, it means a lot to me. I grew up a Gamecock fan, so I've been kind of hanging on these rivalries since I can ever remember. I got to go through it 9 times as a coach, and I remember the pressure of that. I was telling just a friend of mine yesterday, when this weekend ends on Sunday, win or lose, you're exhausted. And it's just the stress. There's no stress compares to this weekend till you get to your regionals. So this is what we always, and Coach Tanner was so great at never minimizing this series to our guys. And I thought that was always huge. This means a lot. Don't try to act like it's just another game. Let's treat this like a regional. When the weekend's over, let's evaluate how we handle that pressure and move on from there. But it's just a really exciting weekend for a coach. I know the players. It's just a buzz in the air that you haven't had, through 9 games. And that's what's exciting about it.
I was talking with our last guest, John Blau, who covers Clemson, Stuart, about last hour, about kind of the similarities between these two teams, and that through the first several games of the season, they both handled business with the exception of one game, right, where they, committed errors, just didn't play well, things kind of got away. But what do you see from this year's Clemson team and your scouting, from what you've heard, from what you've observed, as far as just their overall team identity?
Well, honestly, up until probably Wednesday, I had just kept up with Clemson through scores. And then you start putting them side by side, and some numbers really jump out. When you start seeing their team batting average, 330, 17 home runs. You compare that back over to Gamecock's offense has been putting up averaging almost double digits, 285 batting average and only 11 home runs. So those two jumped out at me. They're doing very well getting on base at 441, but we're doing unbelievable at 474. And then the runs, which are always crucial, obviously, 84 Gamecock, 69 Clemson. So I think you're going to see a very similar type team. They've got Cam Canarello, who's 517 with his 576, and then you go, okay, we can do you a little better. We got Brewer with 519 and 622 on base. So it's really going to be cool to watch these two teams match up this weekend.
Again, talking to Stuart Lake from the Gamecocks Radio Network. You mentioned Clemson's offense so far this season. They're top 10 in all of college baseball when it comes to those home runs with 17. And looking at South Carolina's pitching, with the exception of that one game against Belmont, been very efficient, holding most of their opponents in check. How do you feel like they're going to stack up against a team that can hit for power like Clemson can this weekend?
Well, this is one of those cases, and I can say it when I'm not coaching, weather might be an issue. Let's see what this weather brings. I'm going to tell you right now, no one likes playing in cold weather. I don't care how tough you want to be, and mentally tough is part of it. But if it's a really cold, kind of wet night on Friday night, I think that changes both offenses. But I feel like with the South Carolina pitching staff, they do a thing that I enjoy the most. I told y'all this before the season started. Matt Williams is so much about let's throw strikes. if we throw strikes, we got a chance to get them to hit our defense. And if they hit it to our defense, we're fielding right now 968. You got a pretty good chance you're going to avoid those big innings. And that's what they're going to have to do. And that's what Clemson, I know Clemson's sitting looking at Gamecock stats going, they've been walked 86 times, which, by the way, leads the country, and hit 18 times. So they're going to be coming in here really trying to eliminate those extra bases as well.
Coach, you started off talking about the South Carolina pitching staff. I wanted to ask you about a couple of guys in particular. I think we all, if you've followed enough baseball, whenever you hear a guy's having a little arm issue going into a year, even when they say, hey, it's going to be a week, it's going to be a couple weeks, you're kind of secretly a little bit worried, I think, as a fan. But for Kimball and then of course, Matthew Becker, man, both those guys, I feel like have just been honestly fantastic, like maybe exceeding expectations so far. What do you think that means for, I would even go as far as to say, the ultimate upside of this team this year if those two guys can keep building on what they've done so far this year?
No, I think it could be huge. I mean, the great thing about Becker and Kimball was unrelated to the arm. Both are that lat muscle, and both have, and really what we've seen, haven't shown any issues with it. And I ate breakfast with coaches on Monday, and I said, man, I love Roman on Sunday because he brings energy. Mm-hmm. It is fun to watch a Sunday starter just go out and just look like he's enjoying being out there, because there's so many Sunday games that decide the series, and I've really enjoyed what he's brought to the table. And then I'm sure the coaches are still trying to figure out where Matthew Becker is going to fit in. But, boy, when he comes in, you love it when he's in. So if that's a starter, if that's your left-handed guy at the bullpen, and then you got Ty Good. We haven't even talked about yet. I think he's got probably a pitch in his curveball that's as equalizer as Chris Veach's changeup. So I'm really excited for Gamecock pitching staff of what's starting to develop, not just on the starter side, but out of the bullpen, as you mentioned.
Stuart, something else we know about this Clemson team is that Cam Canarella, their outstanding outfielder, I think, what is he hitting, about 500 to start the season?
Yeah.
And leading off for them. He really seems to be their tone setter. How important, in your opinion, is it going to be to kind of control him and not let him get things started for the Tigers?
Well, I think it's really going to be important. I just don't know how well you can control him in a sense. At 517, that's incredible batting average right now. He's already got 15 hits. The biggest thing with Cam is he's not a true base runner. I mean, you look at the stats, he's really only 0 for 1 right now on the year, and you go back to last year, now he's 24 for 29 last year, but it's just the energy. If you can have him jogging back to the dugout at the start games, the Gamecocks, you got to feel much better, because he is no doubt their spark plug, and it just has led. He's a big reason they're hitting 330 as a team, hitting 517.
Coach, you've had the opportunity to be a part of this rivalry, as you mentioned, for many, many years. Do you have a definitive favorite moment that stands out to you when these two teams have gotten together?
Well, I do. I was part of that 2002 coaching staff, and at the time, we didn't have the social media that we do now. We didn't really comprehend what was going on back here when we were in Omaha. And my brother, Stephen, was working for the governor at the time and kept calling me and saying, hey, we're giving days off, and it's just still a moment in my life. And then coming back, Coach Tanner mentioned it in a staff meeting the other day. We come back here, which is a memory that you hardly ever hear, but we came back to Sarge Fry after the World Series. We had lost to Texas in the national championship game. We probably had 2,500 fans meet us here because we had beaten Clemson twice in Omaha. So 20 years later, it's hard to top that one, and then they did it again in 2010. So that's probably my most moment. But Coach Tanner used to have a cool saying to us when we go to Clemson, let's let them play their song one time at the beginning of the game, and then I don't want to hear it again. So when we knew we got on the bus and hadn't heard that song too many times, we knew we'd probably had a pretty good day up there.
Yeah, Coach, final thing here. What is the biggest key for South Carolina to not be hearing that song much this weekend?
I think it's going to come down to pitching again, as it always does. Throwing strikes. It's going to be a bunch of guys. This is new to them. You know, Roman Kimball, I think, is a special dude. He'll be the guy if the weather dictates he pitches on Sunday. Now, that's the thing. None of us know what's going to happen tomorrow night. they've kind of both said we're going to stay with the same rotation, which would put Roman pitching on Sunday at Clemson. Who knows, if you don't get a game in and you just play a 2-game series, that could change. But I just think it'll be how can we handle the nerves of pitching for the first time. This will be the first road game for both teams. Both teams have played all their games at home. So just it's going to be, to me, who can minimize walks, who can minimize those fielding errors, and then who can take advantage of offensive opportunities they get.
Well, Coach, hopefully we can dodge the bad weather this weekend. We're talking about South Carolina taking the series once again when it's all said and done. Appreciate your time as always, Coach.
I enjoy it. Thank you, guys.
Again, Stuart Lake from the Gamecocks Radio Network. We'll come back. The lineup for SEC Media Days just dropping a little bit earlier on. Where did Shane Beamer end up on the schedule? We'll discuss that coming up next. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you on this Thursday morning. Reminding you to once again go to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. Whenever a Gamecock hitter hits a Grand Slam this season, you can win however much money is in the pot, and it will continue to go up each game by $25. So again, the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. It's going to be a great weekend for baseball. Weather looking a little bit dodgy, so maybe you don't want to get out and deal with the rain, and maybe you're going to watch the game at home on TV. Hopefully, you have the right setup to do that. If you don't, our friends at Integrated Media can help you out.
They can definitely help you out. They've been to my home. They've been to Wes Mitchell's home. They can come out to yours. Whether you need something from an audiovisual standpoint at your home or at your business, they can take care of both of those. IntegratedMediaInc.com, or give Michael and Nathan and their team a call, 803-948-8327. And if you want some examples of their past work, what can they do? I can tell you what they can do. Everything from mounting a TV, cleaning up all the wires around all your audiovisual equipment, to complete smart home solutions, security, cameras, tricking out your man cave. They can do all of it. But check them out on Facebook and Instagram as well. Integrated Media Columbia. You can check out a gallery of some of their past work. 803-948-8327.
It's never too early to start looking ahead to SEC Media Days in July. Literally just a couple of minutes ago, we got the official rundown of the order in which we're going to be hearing from coaches when that does roll around in the middle of the summer. Shane Beamer going to be in the leadoff day, being the third coach we hear from between Lane Kiffin and Clark Lee on day number 1 on July the 15th.
Yeah, we got a couple of little releases in the last hour. Some news about a former Gamecock women's basketball player coming back to Columbia, and we find out the order of SEC Media Days. Man, that thing will be here before we know it. But first, guys, we got to get through spring practice. I don't know. It's an interesting note. You've got it. So Beamer goes, Chris, you said after Kiffin?
Yeah, there's 4 coaches speaking the first day, and so who's first, Tyler? Do you
It's Brian Kelly.
Brian Kelly.
So first day will be Kelly, Kiffin, Beamer, and then
Which accent will he be using this time?
and then Clark Lee wrapping up the day, which I don't feel like putting Clark Lee last is probably the best decision. I feel like you would probably want to put him in the middle between two more like interesting coaches. That way you're almost at least forcing people to sit around and listen to what he has to say, and opposed to like, hey, let me beat the traffic a little bit and get out of here early. It's just Clark Lee.
Nah, poor guy. Been a rough year for Vandy.
Dude, it's just tough there.
He said in due time they would be the best program in the country.
Well, I don't know how long due time is, but they're a long way from it.
Yeah, that's tough.
Which, as any coach, you're going to say that, right? Like, you're not going to say, well, we strive to be maybe the 10th best team in the SEC. No, every coach is going to say, we're going to be the best team in the country. There's only a handful of ones that you believe it's actually going to happen. Unfortunately, Vanderbilt's not one of those.
Hey, it gets people talking about you, too. Like,
Sure.
if any,
It worked.
really, if half the other schools say that, maybe it's not even a headline, but when you say that at Vandy, there's some hefty goals, we'll say. But, I mean, I think that's, to your point, Tyler, that's the approach I would want my coach to have no matter where I'm at. I mean, you look at Matt Campbell, you look at the Lions, like people were laughing at what he was saying when he got hired, and you know, he's completely turned that franchise around. Like that's what you want in your leader, is a guy who says, don't tell me the odds. I'm here to defy them.
Who do we think the player reps will be?
Oh, man.
Ooh, good question.
We'll revisit this, I'm sure, closer to July. But
now,
he's not taking sellers.
I would say, would you
too
take
early.
somebody that's a new transfer in that hasn't played
No.
with your team before?
I doubt it. Last year, it was remember Rattler didn't go.
Yeah, Ryder didn't go.
going
on
into
it.
year
last
one.
year.
He went last year. Rattler, Kroger, and Tonka Hemingway.
Tonka.
It's going to be.
Maybe like Boogie.
It's gonna be
See,
Boogie.
I was about to say, Boogie makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I want Hunter Rogers to go. The snapper. Boogie is as close to a lock as you could get.
Yeah,
in my
probably
opinion.
so. Yeah,
I could see Debo Williams being.
Yeah.
it's a good one too. Got to have somebody from offense.
You need an offensive player. Rocket's a transfer. Luke Doty?
Luke's been, hadn't he?
I don't even remember.
What about, I don't know. What about like Josh Simon?
It'd be
Second
entertaining.
year guy,
Be a good one.
maybe.
Talk about hunting and things like that. I don't know.
Sure.
We'll revisit.
Yeah,
Love Josh
we're,
Simon.
We're all in agreement. Boogie Huntley
Yeah.
is a lock. He's going.
Absolutely. Wes mentioned this just a moment ago. This news also coming out within the past hour. At Colonial Life Arena on May the 11th, former South Carolina star Asia Wilson going to bring her Las Vegas Aces into town for a preseason contest to take on the Puerto Rican team. Again, that's coming up on May the 11th. So, again, very cool to see Asia Wilson getting to return to Colonial Life.
Yeah, man, we talked all week about big soccer match being in Columbia. Now you've got a WNBA team coming to Columbia. I'm a huge fan of these sort of outside the box events, I guess you'd say, and bringing them into not just your university, but bringing them into the city. And I think it's just yet another of the many things that Dawn Staley has done to continue to kind of grow the women's game here in the Midlands and throughout the state, really. So I think it's a cool opportunity for people to get to see a WNBA team. And, I mean, guys, Asia Wilson, like at this point, what else is there for her to even accomplish? Like, she's a New York Times best-selling author at this point. Been an MVP. They've won the finals. Obviously, she won national title here, Player of the Year here. I mean, it's so cool that she has the vision that was presented to her when she signed with South Carolina. She's not only checked off every single box, she's actually amazingly exceeded that. So this is just another step. Very, very cool for her and for South Carolina women's basketball. And South Carolina basketball in general at this point, guys, with yet another road SEC win last night, South Carolina, the best record in college basketball, combined men's and women's.
Absolutely. So good time for basketball all around, and that cool exhibition coming up again on May the 11th with the Aces and a team from Puerto Rico. We're going to come back and wrap up today's edition, talking to our guy Pete Nakos from On3 about all the litany of changes that have happened in the world of college football just over these last couple weeks, including things with the extra signing day and the latest lawsuits going against the NCAA. That's all coming up next right here on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on the Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you. A couple more minutes to go here. Heading out to Love Chevrolet phone lines. Welcome back in our guy Pete Nakos from On3. Pete, it's been a little while since we've last talked to you, and since then, a lot of things changing in the landscape of college football. We are looking at an extra signing period. We've had more NCAA rules, get rescinded. If you had to guess what was coming next, do you have any idea what that could be?
Oh, boy, yes. Well, first off, thanks for having me back on. Love being on. And what's coming next at this point? The NCAA's got to figure out what to do with this preliminary injunction I got handed the other day. So what that looks like, I'm not quite sure. And I know for a fact, I reported on it earlier this week, the NCAA has no clue what really to do moving forward either.
Pete, Chris Clark here. Give us just a very broad overview of, kind of, if you will, condense the past couple weeks, the past few weeks, and just give our listeners a sense of where things actually stand. What has happened generally, and what does it mean for the current state of college athletics?
Yeah, so obviously tomorrow's March 1. March Madness is coming, but I guess the last 8 weeks, right? I mean, the transfer portal finally slowed down a little bit. Nick Saban retired. The coaching carousel is finally slowing down after that, and after the Nick Saban butterfly effect. And I mean, from an overall college sports perspective, you have that preliminary injunction in Tennessee that does not let the NCAA govern name, image, and likeness, and more specifically, the South Carolina NIL collective and things like that can now openly negotiate with high school athletes and transfer portal players. So that's kind of where our focus has been. But, I mean, it's something new every day, guys. And even when I'm sitting here with you right now, I'm sure I'm leaving something out that just, is escaping my mind. But it's a laundry list these days.
Yeah, and Pete, you'll probably have another phone call and 3 texts when you get off about whatever the next big thing is with all this. But I was curious, man, realistically, if you are a collective right now, I mean, are you hearing that collectives are going ahead and just saying, hey, we're completely free to do what you just said and go ahead and start making deals? Or are they having to be maybe a little bit more cautious just because of the changing landscape and any concern of hey, I might do this now, and then next week they might say, well, actually you can't do that, and retroactively get yourself in trouble? Do you think collectives are sort of all hands on deck, let's just move forward with this, or do they have to be a little bit more hesitant about that?
Obviously a case-by-case basis, I think, right now, but
right.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head that a lot of the top college football programs in the country, and with that these days comes a pretty elite NIL collective. I mean, a lot of them are getting the battleships ready and ready to go out, hit the road. I mean, I reported the other day, I talked to some folks who were even talking about going on recruiting visits with coaches. And, I think we always talked about when NIL started, the most aggressive schools, those will be the ones that really do the damage. And you look now, right, in Tennessee, Florida State, Ole Miss, a lot of those states, all did really big things. And now their collectives are thriving. And now you look at the landscape we're in right now, and the collectives and the schools that choose to be aggressive will probably really profit and go pretty far. And having the most money really matters right now, and that's going to make a difference when it comes to getting the top recruits.
Again, talking to our guy Pete Nakos from On3 with this latest ruling, and again, more rules being rescinded from the NCAA in reference to NIL. We always talk about the end goal potentially being, collectively bargaining between, the schools, the leagues, and the players. How much closer are we to that eventually happening?
So we're 100% closer than ever. I think the big question now is, there's the legal forces and the courts, and do athletes become employees before the NCAA or the SEC and Big Ten commissioners make a move to start revenue sharing and collective bargaining? I mean, I talk with a bunch of athletes and admins every week who kind of tell me that being an employee really is not very attractive, right? And a lot of people don't know what that model will look like. And some of the things tied to it and how that will all kind of come together. So I think revenue sharing probably needs to happen. I think we're closer than we've ever been. I said 18 months to someone last week, and it feels like we're closer to like this week than last week. And that person pointed out to me this week, they're like, really, 18 months? Like, might be sooner. And they might be right. So it's changing every day, and we're definitely super close to revenue sharing.
Hey, Pete, what are you hearing from the people you talk to about the reaction to potentially moving up National Signing Day? I think the earlier in December thing is a pretty small potential move, but then obviously the reporting earlier this week talking about a possible late June signing day as well. What have the reactions you've heard to that sort of been?
You know, I know a lot of, like, coaches love the idea of, like, the summer signing day. But then you talk to, like, some agents and some athletes, and obviously I know high school coaches are very opinionated about it, and you think about it, and I think there's a lot of shortfalls that happen with the summer National Signing Day, right? Like, most athletes who sign, there's a chance that coaches could leave, right? I mean, we've seen the carousel really get heated up in, like, January and February, so definitely that's a possibility. And then the other thing you kind of have to think about too, I mean, Chris, you know this better than anyone, but all the decommitments and things like that, like, what if the kid's signing a national letter of intent in July? Like, he's really going to stick with his commitment that long? And obviously official visits are in June too, and snap reactions and things like that. So I think that there's a lot of flaws in that idea.
Pete, one of the other things that's been talked about recently, I know Jim Nagy, you got a story on this on on3.com, and you spoke with Jim Nagy about it. You know, I think we all thought that more players were staying in college basketball and college football as opposed to just jumping to the NFL. And it seems like we have some more actionable data from that. Can speak to that a little bit, and then what that maybe should mean for fans of college football who want to see their favorite players stay in college for longer.
Yeah, so I believe the number is 54 early underclassmen and enrollees in the NFL draft this year. The lowest since 2011. And I think it's pretty clear than ever that NIL and the portal are playing a role on that. Talk to some agents, talk to Jim Nagy, as you mentioned. And I think that, and I have quotes on this in the story, but I think it's really apparent that, right, athletes can now make better decisions for themselves and their family. And while maybe a decade ago people were going to the drafts just so they could get the money to help pay for something at home or things like that, now they can just take the NIL dollars and develop more into a better overall athlete, and in some cases maybe even be higher in the draft because of NIL.
Pete, appreciate your insight as always. I know this won't be the last conversation we have with you on the changing landscape of college football, because it's truly something new every single day.
I appreciate it, guys. Have a great day.
And
Thanks,
that's our
appreciate you, man.
Pete Nakos from On3. Yeah, I can't remember the last time we had him on, but it's essentially a million things have happened since then, it seems like.
Well, I think it's dizzying to even try to keep up with if you're a fan right now. And I think there's been so much change in college athletics all at once. And, you know, obviously transfer portal, NIL, how all of this is actually logistically handled. And then, honestly, conference realignment. Like, I feel like I work in the business, and if you randomly throw a school at me, there's a good chance I can't even tell you what conference they're in anymore. So I know just a random fan out there probably feels just the same.
It took me a second watching the rundown of SEC Media Days, seeing Texas and Oklahoma on there, you know, being part of the conference now. It's like, oh, yeah, that's the new thing that we're going to have to get used to. But, again, everything's changing in the landscape of college football day in and day out. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with Terry Ford coming up next right here on The Game.